This talk can be thought of as a slightly odd pitch for this conference to change its name, which Constance probably wouldn't like, she was already right about the name when she spoke about it this morning. But it's a pitch to kind of change the word digital minds with artificial minds, with a view to being slightly more inclusive and maybe looking into places where minds might be, instead of accidentally missing where they seem most likely to be at the moment. But let me explain why. So I'm Chris Percy, I'm a researcher in this space. Some of the things I've looked at are water computers and consciousness, different theories like integrated information theory or EM field theories, what thought might feel like inside a neural network. Lots of fun in those areas. But today it's all about this distinction between digital and analog. When I say artificial minds, it's really the consciousness bit I'm most interested in. So I want to spend just 30 seconds on a definition. We've probably all got sort of more sophisticated definitions in this room than perhaps in wider society. My preferred one for consciousness is a lowest common denominator one. Of all the states you could possibly be in, what's the thing they have in common? That's what we should be talking about. In practice though, we tend to work more with a contrastive sort of approach. We compare the brain in its awake state to its deep sleep state, or something like that. And that's helpful, but it's a bit more assumption driven. What I particularly like about the first approach is if you could ever imagine, or if you've ever been in a particular state of consciousness without a certain feature present, without a certain capability, like a self model or a world model perhaps, then we know that consciousness can contain that feature but is not defined by it. But that's plenty of that. When people are looking at states which are with fairly high confidence unconscious versus conscious, we can take pictures of the brain and get a view on what are some of the differences. And this is one of those. This is from Extender et al. And they compare the unresponsive wakefulness syndrome with other states of consciousness. And if you look at the metabolic activity in the brain, you get a fairly clear picture of kind of more activity, more likely to be conscious, more likely to still be conscious in a year's time. So we've got something to go on. But when we say more activity, what does that mean? Because the problem is, the brain is doing so much stuff, but all we really know is that some of this increased activity is probably related to this in some way. It could be something to do with recurrent processing in the brain. We know that when there's less of that, we look more like the first picture. It could also be something to do with broadcasting between multiple networks. But we also see oscillations in the brain. The primary marker between deep sleep and other states of consciousness is the speed at which you've got electromagnetic waves fluctuating across the brain. Or there might be something to do with phase synchrony between these different fields. There's just lots and lots of stuff it could be. So we probably need a bit more than just this to go on. The distinction I want to draw on today is digital versus analog. And all I mean by digital is you can simulate it, say on a digital computer, and if you simulate it accurately enough, that is it. It's identical, you've captured everything that matters. Analog, I just mean that is not the case. So there is something about it that you can simulate to arbitrary levels of input-output precision, but it's somehow still not the same. What is analog? What sorts of functions are analog? So we cannot simulate them perfectly digitally. Well, there's quite a few. Their links to consciousness are kind of very uncertain, but I just want to give you a flavor of why they might matter today. I'm not trying to persuade you that one of these is definitely the case. This is a possibility-based conversation, not a guarantee. So quantum is one thing. You can simulate quantum entanglement as much as you want. You don't create quantum entanglement. And we know that certain quantum properties like spin are related to how anesthetics work. And there's a few theories of consciousness grounded in those sort of ideas. Electromagnetic fields, which might lead to some of those points around resonance or oscillation frequencies. Again, those are things which you have to do them. You can't just simulate them. And some of these, we know that the brain uses electromagnetic field effects for cognition. They're factor effects, they're called in the literature. Do they matter for consciousness? Well, they might. And in some theories, they do. But then you've also got other ideas. You've got ideas linked to the fact that any kind of information processing is a thermodynamic process. As soon as it's thermodynamic, maybe there are phase transitions that matter. Maybe there's a spatio-temporal intensity that matters. There are versions of global workspace theory that can draw on those ideas. And maybe hints to something about metabolism as well. Non-computable mathematics, whether it's the process of doing mathematics or non-computable numbers, Does the exact value of pi matter for consciousness? I don't know, but it's deeply profound in various areas of geometry and mathematics. So maybe. If it matters, then we need something analog. Because you can create it in an analog system, you cannot simulate it exactly digitally. Okay, so we've got lots of lists of possible analog functions that might or might not be relevant. But why would we care? Why might it be likely? I'm going to give two very brief reasons, just as teasers, really. One is, if you want to escape the idea that the United States as an economy is conscious, under most of the prevailing sort of digital theories of consciousness, it's quite hard to avoid that conclusion. And if you don't want to bite that bullet, and maybe you do, you could bite that bullet, but if you don't, this gives you a disciplined way out. It's also possible that without some analog functionality, you actually can't solve quite important aspects of consciousness, like the complex nature of it. And there's a concept called phenomenal binding, which is quite hard to get out of digital systems, maybe impossible. But that's just to give you a little bit of a flavor of that. Nearly the last thing I want to say is, this is not bio-chauvinism. That is something that can be levied at some of the ideas in here, and quite, at a conference like this is pretty uncomfortable language, and it's not what we're talking about here. Because there are people building artificial systems, so the word is artificial rather than digital, but people are building systems today where these types of consciousness might be present. People are building quantum computers. Some people like Nirvana are specifically trying to build a conscious quantum computer. If you think analog features around resonance or oscillations might matter, or something around non-computable numbers, neuromorphic computing, optical computing, reservoir computing, it's being done. Or if there's something else in biology, but we're still not quite sure what, it's not that, it's something else. Well, there are people putting biological neurons onto silicon chips and doing processing with them. What do we do with all of this? My last slide is some colleagues and I have got some initial funding to do some work on this topic. We're not alone, there are other people looking into this topic as well, but it's such a large topic we kind of need considerably more. What we think we need, and where we want to help, is to generate better knowledge resources for us as a sector, as a community that worries about this topic. We want decent lists of the theories out there, not just a few cherry-picked ones. We want to know what those theories tell us or don't tell us about consciousness. How do you actually find their indicators of consciousness in different systems? Their indicators of sentience, of valence as well. And once you've got all of that, how might you decide which of these theories to actually believe? And that's quite a personal decision, I think, but we can at least generate good resources to support that kind of decision making. So that's what we're doing at the Co-Sentience Initiative. We're not Googleable, we don't formally exist yet, we're just getting going. It's a great time to get in touch with ideas or suggestions if you would like. Thank you for listening.